Jim. He's dead.
Hello and welcome to Improv Autopsy. I'm your host, Stephen Cadwell. This episode is part one of my interview with Mike Carr. Mike was instrumental in getting our long-form show up and running at SAK Comedy Lab back when I lived in Orlando. He's a working actor, director, and playwright in Central Florida. He's a former artistic director of SAK Comedy Lab, as well as serving as education director and then artistic director at Improv Boston before the pandemic shuttered that theater. Mike is also one of the founding members of Chicago's Revolver. Recently, as of this recording, Mike is director of Forgotten Broadway at Dr. Phillips Center's Judson's Live venue in Orlando, where professional improvisers create legendary Broadway careers on the spot inspired by audience suggestions. If this isn't still running, call Dr. Phillips Center and demand they bring it back. Mike has a huge heart, and this makes him very empathic as a player. Many people take years and years of practice before they're able to be that vulnerable on stage, and Mike is this way naturally. That's what made our playful torture in guerrilla theater, which I mentioned in this episode, so enjoyable with Mike. Because it is so much fun as a player and as an audience member to watch someone genuinely feeling something on stage, to be that vulnerable. If you want that in a player, and I think you do, you want Mike Carr. And now, sit back and enjoy part one of Mike Carr's Improv Autopsy.
It's wonderful to connect with you again.
Oh, yes.
We haven't spoken in years. Yeah, but like it's just it doesn't, like, the second I heard your voice on the phone, I'm like, oh, we're back. Like, it just feels nice.
In the intro, I'll talk about it, but yeah, I met Mike. I met you at SAK when you came down to SAK. You were recruited by Dave out of Chicago, right, to come down to work at Disney?
I love that phrase. Yeah, I was recruited. Yeah, I got hired by Dave and Disney to come down and open a new attraction down there. And while Dave was the director of my show at Disney, he was also the director of SAK at the time. And was like, "Oh, hey, come play at SAK." And I was like, "Okay."
Yeah, and we'll get there when I get to those questions. But there are a couple questions that I have here that were inspired by you.
Oh, fun.
With Mike Carr, SAK started Early Show, which was its first foray into long form improv in a while.
Yeah.
It had done some in the past, but not as long as I had been there. So that was fun. And
that was fun.
I moved to Chicago. You moved to Boston for a bit, and now you're back in Orlando.
Yeah, we're all over the place.
So your first encounter?
First encounter, yeah. It was arguably the first encounter, the first time I saw it, which would be TV. I definitely used to watch Whose Lines Is It Anyway all the time. I feel like most of our generation kind of have that connection because it was on Comedy Central every day.
Yeah, all the time.
All the time. And it was all the British ones. It was the old ones with Tony Slattery and Mike McShane, who I got to meet in LA, which was one of the coolest moments of my life, was meeting him.
Oh, nice.
Just a quick tangent, and then I'll get back to it. Because I used to love watching him on Whose Line, and I love Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, where he was a sheriff. It was a Friar Tuck. I was doing an improv intensive in LA as a student, and I saw the improvised Tennessee Williams by the Improv Theater, and he was in it, playing the Big Daddy type character from Tennessee Williams stuff. And just, you wouldn't believe the show was improvised. You were watching it going, this is scripted. There's no way they're making this up. And he was the nicest, kindest, such a down-to-earth guy, so passionate about improv. So I talked to him for a few minutes after that show, and I was like, oh my God, this just worlds colliding. It was really cool.
He's also the hypnotist in Office Space, right?
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
Forget about that. That's a career I'd love. That character actor who just does these great, small but iconic roles that are just memorable.
Yes.
But yeah, so first encounter. Back in high school, I was a part of a theater camp. It was called Kidstock Creative Theater Education Center in Massachusetts. And one of the sessions, there were like 3-week sessions. And I want to say it was the third session of the junior year of high school was improv. And the teacher at the time, her name was Elise Becker. Now she's Elise Schuerman, Improv Boston royalty. And she taught us improv. And I remember really just falling in love with it there and just getting the chance to do it. It was all short form, theater sports style. That's what they were doing at the time. So they were doing long form, but that's how they taught a lot of their stuff too. So yeah, that was kind of my first time getting to do it and really getting exposed to a professional teaching us what it means to do improv. So yeah, those classes in high school.
And that was part of a theater camp, you said. What inspired you to take the class?
I'd always wanted to be an actor ever since I was a little kid. I remember watching movies and TV shows and just being like, I love that. That looks fun. So I started doing, theater stuff. I did like a couple plays in school, but then when I was in high school, I started doing community theater and did when I was 14, a freshman in high school, I was in My Fair Lady at the local community theater, and I played the bartender, which was funny because I was 14 years old, and I was I had braces, and I was awkward, gawky 14-year-old playing the bartender, kicking this 50, 55, 60-year-old man playing Alfie Doolittle out of the bar with my full-on untrained Cockney dialect, and it was quite a journey.
I imagine your Cockney spot on now, right?
Now I would say it's pretty good.
Yeah. Do you remember the first improv show that you saw live?
Vaguely, I remember it because it was at Improv Boston, and I remember seeing several shows at Improv Boston. But one of the first ones that I remember seeing, it was in high school. I'm probably right around that same time that I was taking those classes. Improv Boston was at this location in Inman Square in Cambridge, which was just a small neighborhood, and their theater was literally like a storefront theater. You walk in, downstairs was the green room in the basement, and very few rows, very small theater, but it was a really cool, like, I don't think you never played. Did you ever play at the old playground space in Chicago?
Yes.
It was like the old playground space is what it felt like. So it was just really like this kind of cool, like you had to know what it was to be there sort of feel. So a couple of my friends and I went and saw shows, and I just was like, wow, this is awesome. Then I remember seeing Elise in the show, and I remember seeing Will Luera in the show. And Will is someone who in the improv community is well known. He's running the Sarasota program right now, the Florida Studio Theater, and he ran Improv Boston for years. And I remember just being enamored with it. And just being like, I remember just loving what I was seeing, and then being like, I'm coming back. And I went back a bunch of times.
Did you go through their program then?
No, I never did. I never thought to even look into it as a high school student. It never dawned on me to look into it. And I was busy enough with like everything I was doing in high school and getting ready for college, but it never dawned on me to go, oh, I wonder if I can take classes there. It never crossed my mind.
So when did you dive into improv and start taking classes?
I didn't take classes until I moved to Chicago officially, but I did workshops in college. When I got to UMass Amherst, I was a theater major, and on the first weekend of college, saw Mission Improbable do a show. They were the resident improv troupe at UMass, and they do an orientation show, and I saw it, and I was like, oh, improv, I remember this. I want to do this. So I auditioned for Mission Improbable in my freshman year, and I didn't get in the first semester, but I got in the second semester and was a part of the troupe for the rest of my college time. And with them, we did tons of workshops. We had people come in. We would go places. The original Mission Improbable guys all moved out to LA, and well, they moved to Chicago, then they moved to LA. But we would have them back all the time, and they would do just private workshops with us, probably 2-3 times a semester for a while. And then they would do a show, and their show was always just next level brilliance, in my opinion. But yeah, so official classes didn't start until I got to Chicago, but a lot of workshops along the way.
Sure. I love, my introduction was college as well, Mike, and I had a college troupe. Nothing like Mission Improbable. Are they still around?
Mission Improbable still exists. Yeah, they have a theater in California called the West Side Theater, and I've not seen a show there. I've been out a couple times, but I haven't seen a show there. Ironically, I did go to the restaurant that is owned by a couple of the Mission Improbable guys. Yeah, they own a restaurant called the Inkwell Tavern in Burbank, California. If you're out in Burbank, California, check out Inkwell Tavern. But now, yeah, they're still doing it. And I know I want to say Aaron Krebs and Lloyd Alquist. Lloyd Alquist does Epic Rap Battles of History and a lot of other work. And I know Aaron works tons in film and TV in a lot of roles. And Ryan Kiesling was another one who was one of the originals who I really, really bonded with a while. He's back in Boston. He was doing Improv Boston when I was there recently. So yeah, they're all still doing it. They're just in kind of different places now.
What about on campus? Does it still exist on campus?
Oh, the college troupe. It does. Yes, it does. It's kind of wild. So, we were probably the third or fourth iteration of Mission Improbable, because I want to say they left UMass. The originals left in like 99 or 2000, or no, they left earlier than that, like maybe 95. I have to check my history, but because I got there in 1999, so there weren't too many iterations of the cast at that point. So when we left, you get your new performers and you audition, they come in. And we went back a few times just to kind of see the old troupe and do workshops when we were living in Chicago and stuff. But yeah, the troupe is still there. And, they have a social media presence, and they're doing a lot of sketch, and they have long form groups. Like, they're doing really well.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And I was just texting with a couple of the troupe members that, we're all still in touch, because improv is, it's, you know this, it's like we're like a weird little family.
Yeah.
we're so important to each other's lives because you find your tribe. I don't know that I like using that language, but like you find your group. You find your group of people, and it sort of becomes such a part of your life. No matter where you go, you're always a part of each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're still going strong.
That's great. My group didn't. My college group didn't really last too much longer after I graduated. Not because I had anything to do with it, but it just. I think they were.
Took it with you.
Yeah. I took my ball and went home. So you moved to Chicago. Were there any other groups that had names that you were a part of? I love improv group names because most of them are terrible.
Oh God, yes. I was a part of, after I auditioned for the Playground, and they had a program called the Incubator Program, where they make teams out of, and the Playground, it's like the improv co-op, is like how it was described to me when I first went there. Yeah, my first team there was called the Tigers of Macedonia.
Any reason?
I don't remember, but I do remember one guy on the team, Glenn. I think he pitched it, and he was like, "What about the Tigers of Macedonia?" We're all like, "Yeah, that's it. That's the name." And that team lasted for a little while, and a lot of those like independent teams, they kind of break off. I was I'm trying to remember a couple other names. My first improv team at IO out of classes was called, because when they make the teams, they give them really just random names. We were Duck, Beaver, and Codswallop was the name, and everyone's like, "Oh, it's just a placeholder. You're going to change it." But by the time our first show came around, we didn't have a new name yet, so we were like, "We'll just be the DBC." So we became the DBC. Like that became our name, and then I played on. I gotta ask my friend Sean what it was. His class had a team that they made, and I played with them a few times. And it's a basketball reference. I want to say it's not Marley, like Dan Marley from the Phoenix Suns of the 1990s, but it's something like that. I gotta ask him. I don't remember what it was. Yeah, and then my last team in Chicago was ended up being called Revolver.
Yes.
And I don't know if they're still around, but they lasted a long time.
Yeah, they did. They were there a while.
Yeah, they became one of the house teams, and it became a staple at the theater. A lot of really great players on that team. But yeah, we were really proud of Revolver. We're like, that's cool. It's like one word. It's the gun. Look at us.
Yeah. I haven't done any scientific study, but I do wonder if there's any correlation between the longevity of a troupe and the ease of its name. The ease of its...
Well, it's funny. Like I remember talking to a guy I work with here who he was at a festival somewhere, not for improv, but there was an improv team playing, and their team name was Michael Pizza, which I think was a Chicago-based team.
Yes.
But he saw, and he was like, that name doesn't make any sense. And he went to the show, and he loved the show, and he was like, but yeah, that name, I don't get it. Like, why are you called that? Like, what's the point? And I'm like, yeah, that's most improv team names. We're like, it's an inside joke that maybe even we don't get.
Yeah, or have forgotten, right?
Yeah, we forgot the reference. Like, oh yeah, it was Mike said something about pizza, so we became Michael Pizza. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Like, we don't know.
Michael Pizza was performing when I was up there, so we saw them once or twice.
Yeah, and I think I saw them once, and I remember them being great. Like, I remember them being really good. But yeah, the improv team name thing is so interesting. Yeah, there's so many random names of teams.
Yeah.
That I've learned over the years. And I'm like, oh, that's a weird choice.
Sometimes with convoluted rationale, sometimes with zero rationale. It's one of the lovely things about improv.
Yeah. And then there's names that are just like telling them what we do, or like improvised Shakespeare. That's like, we're improvised Shakespeare. Like,
yes.
Cool, I know exactly what I'm saying.
Yep, absolutely. And those are also, I think, helpful, because I don't know what else you would call improv Shakespeare to so succinctly convey what it is you're about to see.
Oh, yeah. If you try to get clever with that, Shakespeare is very clever in general, but if you try to get too clever, you're going to alienate a lot of people that might come see the show. They're going to be like, I don't know what that means.
I don't understand.
I don't want to go to improv and feel stupid. Like,
yeah.
I don't want to go to a show and feel dumb.
Was Mike McShane's improv Tennessee Williams, what was the title of that? Do you remember, or was it just improvised Tennessee Williams?
Improvised Tennessee Williams.
Yep.
That was it. Yep. And as the Improv Theater presents Improvised Tennessee Williams, and they do all genre-based improv. They do a theater sports show, I think, too, but they do, they did improvised. Oh gosh, what's that show? Improvised Twilight Zone. Tons of improvised film noir. They did all. They're all genre-based, and they're really talented. But yeah, they just call it what it is.
Yeah, nothing wrong with it.
No, it's great, and there's nothing wrong with silly names either.
No, I agree. Yeah, I have yet, I think, to find an improv name that didn't endear itself to me on some level. Like, I haven't been offended by any or turned off by any. Some of them I do question, like, what? But
yeah. But yeah, I've never heard a team name like, I won't see that show. I was like, oh, okay.
No, we just need a team now to call itself Don't See Us. And
yeah,
we'll see if
which honestly, that's a pretty great marketing thing. Don't come to this show. Like, I'd be like, I gotta go now. I gotta know what you're gonna do.
Yeah, curiosity is piqued.
Yeah, you've done it.
All right, so moving to some improv performance stuff. Do you remember the first show you performed in, that you did improv in?
It would have been that class that I took in high school. We had a showcase.
Okay.
Yeah, we had a showcase for parents and everybody. So that probably the first improv show I performed in official.
When would you say that it clicked for you as far as this is something that I want to do more? Was there a moment it was either in that class or when you saw it later or when you remembered with Mission Improbable when you were in college when there were fewer distractions?
Yeah, when I got into Mission, I didn't get in the first semester, and a lot of the people that I got to know at the audition who got in ended up becoming friends of mine. And in the second semester, they did another audition, and they said, "Hey, make sure you audition this time." And I got in, and I also got cast in a play in the theater department. So I wasn't available a lot. And they graciously let me stay in the troupe. They didn't kick me out. They were like, okay, well, we'll figure it out. So most of that semester, I was rehearsing for a play at the department and missing a lot of improv rehearsals. I'd be there when I could. And something Mission Improbable did, and did it on campus and when they were touring, is they gave you a name. Like, you had a name. I think the original guys themed it as sort of like Mission Impossible, so they were agents.
Okay.
We didn't do the agent thing in college. We just had names. So we had stage names, and your stage name usually was bestowed upon you by the troupe, something that happened in rehearsal or something about your personality. For example, one guy that we let into the troupe became known as Misty on his first night because they were having a party, and in college, when someone needs to have a drink or something, if you're not of a certain age, somebody might pick something up and leave it somewhere, and then you pick it up. I'm not saying we did that. I'm just saying that's something that happens in colleges.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Seems feasible.
And yep. And of course, freshmen in college are, some are trying to pretend to be tough. Like, oh, I'll take this beer. I'll take this. And this guy goes, I'll take a bottle of Arbor Mist, which was a gross wine, and it was cheap. But he knew what he wanted, and all of the older troupe members laughed about it. But he was like, hey, this is my wine. So he became Misty right away, and it's like. It kind of formed a personality almost. Like, the names become a personality to you. So my first semester, I didn't get a name, and I had to do a show, and it was the last show of the year. And they were like, well, we usually don't see you, so we finally found you, so we're going to call you Waldo. And that became my stage name. And I was like, I'm Waldo. Okay, what does Waldo mean? And I was Waldo for that show, and then maybe 3 shows in the next semester, until one of the guys who had come back he went away for a semester, this guy, Matt Hicks. We're in rehearsal, and we're going over stage names. He was Chucky, and he looked at me and he goes, "What's your name?" And I went, "Waldo." And he goes, "No, you're Bulldog." Just like that. And I was like, "Oh." And that name changed how I looked at doing improv, to be honest. It was weird, but I'm like, oh, that feels way better than Waldo. Waldo feels like I can't find anything, whereas Bulldog's like, I know what I am. So it kind of clicked for me in that semester, my first semester of my sophomore year, because honestly, the troupe was down to like 7 people, because a lot of people graduated the year before. So I had to essentially become, quote unquote, a bulldog and figure out how to hold my own on stage and figure out how to play, because I didn't really have that time the previous semester. So I would say that semester was when I was like, oh, it's starting to make sense to me. I'm starting to feel who I am on this stage.
That's awesome. So it was like the scene in whatever X-Men movie it was with Ian McKellen and whoever's playing Pyro, and he's like, "What's your name?" And he says, "John." And he says, "What's your real name, John?"
Yeah, it's exactly like that. Like, it felt like I had an identity in that stage. And when you like anything, I equate a lot of things. I'm a big pro wrestling fan, so I equate a lot of things to pro wrestling, and a lot of similarities between the two. You're performing live in front of an audience. If you make a mistake, everybody sees it, but you have to make it look like it's not a mistake. And you are yourself, but you're playing a version of yourself. So I always kind of took it as, I have to play an elevated version of myself when I'm doing an improv show, especially with Mission Improbable, because we marketed it. It was weekly, Saturdays at 8 o'clock in the campus center, and it was like a high energy improv comedy show. And we did a short form show. So I had to find that character, I had to find that version of myself that gets up in front of, 200 strangers and just acts like a weirdo.
Yeah.
Because me personally, I don't do that. Me personally, I'm very quiet. I'm very kind of I'm an extroverted introvert is how I would describe it. Like,
Yeah.
but when I was in that position where I'm like, I have to like let this be who I am. It finally came out and it felt really good.
Did you find that have you carried that bulldog persona with you when you perform other places, or has that changed?
It's changed, but I still carry that sort of persona. It's a confidence, like is how I kind of think of it. Like when I started at SAK, I obviously I was Mike at SAK, but like I found things from my time at UMass that helped me find that comfort on stage with SAK. So yeah, it's kind of carried through and it's morphed over time.
So my experience was limited before SAK. It was my college troupe, and that was pretty much it. But one of the things I really like about SAK, and maybe this is just sort of part of short form, is that that idea that you're playing a character the entire time you're on stage, and you're there for the on stage the entire time. This audience can see you the entire time, even when you're not performing, at least at SAK. And you have a persona, and there are some personas. Some people were kind of antagonistic with the audience. Some people were friendlier. Some people were sad. But it was always a persona that you were playing, and it was to play with the audience with what you were doing. And I think sometimes with some of long form teams, you miss out on a little bit of that and that energy that you have between the character that you're playing and the audience. So I do like that, and I more people I think could benefit from that idea that you're playing a character the entire time you're there. You're not yourself 100%. You're a heightened version, like you said, of yourself.
Yeah, and I think most improvisers should go. I think learning one discipline is fine, but I think you should learn more. Like I think, you know, like I started doing short form, then I switched to long form, and then came back to short form. But everything you do in each iteration of improv, it informs the other. They're all connected.
Yes.
And I definitely, you know, in my time, I've encountered people that are like, well, I'm a short form player, I don't do long form, or I don't do long form, or I don't do short form, I do long form. And it's like, yeah, that's great, but what an audience responds to and what other improvisers responds to are things that translate to both mediums, right? Like, so to see someone shirk one in favor of the other, and you know, at times in my improv life, I kind of did that too. And I'm like, oh, that's not helpful. These skills all translate. They all help each other out. So learn multiple, like go do a short form show. Short form gave me the confidence when I got to Chicago to feel comfortable on stage, because I had been on stage for 4 years.
Yeah.
Every week. So like I got a lot of stage time. And when it came time for me to go audition for other groups, I was like, oh, I know how to be on stage. I'm already comfortable with that. And people who had only done long form training, in my experience at the time, kind of hung back. You know, we're like, well, you know, it's about the group, it's about group mind, it's about building something on stage, and it is. But the best way I can take, and this was an annoyance thing I think Mark Sutton said once was, or maybe Joe Bill, one of them said, the only way I can take care of you is if I take care of myself.
Yeah.
And that stuck with me. That stuck with me a lot. And having short form experience taught me to be like, oh, I'm holding my own on stage. I'm comfortable. Great. What can I do to help?
And I think that's sort of inward looking. It's about the group. It's group mind. If that's where you're stuck, if that's a hurdle, because there is a group mind and it is about the group. I don't want to detract from that necessarily.
No, not at all.
But if you're kind of stuck in that and that's holding you back, the bigger divide in improv is it performative or is it process? And I think if it's just group mind and it's just group, then that's more process, that's not performance. And short form is always performance, and that really hones the performance side of things. So I think that lets you tap into some resources that you might not have readily available if you're really focused on just this weird ethereal thing we're creating.
Yeah, and I think that during our time at SAK, I thought we had a pretty good balance of both. I thought that because when I first came to SAK, I remember like before the 5 of us, you know, me, you, Dinger, and Greg and David were given our spots, like it was not fun to be there. Like it was hard because it felt like everyone was just doing the same old tricks of the show and just doing the short form show and just being performative with it, instead of actually connecting and listening and growing. And then things changed, and it literally felt like you could go into a show on a Friday or a Saturday and we had no idea what was going to happen, even if it was the list of games that we played the week before.
Yeah.
We were still like, anything can happen. And it often did. And that's what made it fun. But I think we had a good balance of that, I always felt.
I think so too, and I think the balance is key. And in either side, so I know we were kind of forced into doing some mid-formy, short-form games when we had early show going, but I don't think that was to the detriment of the product, what we were doing, or the enjoyment of the audience.
No.
I think our short-form skills definitely informed what we were doing in the long-form set, when whatever form we decided to do that week.
Yeah, and we learned so much from all of that too.
Yeah.
We every week was like, I remember some of those posts, we were just, dissecting it and talking about what worked and what didn't, but also being like, it was fun, right? We had fun along the way, so let's try to remember that. And there were times where it wasn't as fun, but like I felt like we always worked through it, and it always felt like we were going to come out the other end okay.
Yeah. Okay. So getting back to some of these questions, this is one that was inspired by you.
Yeah.
As I mentioned.
Ooh.
Can you think of any near misses or something that could have gone sideways but didn't?
Nothing specific. I thought when you sent me the questions, I looked at that one and was like, "Oh, that's a good one."
Let me refresh your memory on a thing, because I want your perspective of it.
Please.
Because I saw it from the audience.
Okay.
And it amazed me. I thought you were inspired. And this is an improv show thing, but not like a scene. So
okay.
It is, I don't know what time of year. You're on stage. This is Amelia Street SAK, your green room side of things, stage left.
Mm-hmm.
I think you come out and you're talking, and you see, as did everybody else, sitting kind of in front of the booth, there's a guy that looks a heck of a lot like Santa Claus.
Oh God, I remember this moment.
Okay, so you continue from there, from your perspective, because from the audience, I thought, oh crap, Mike is going to crash and burn, and then you didn't, and it was magical.
Okay, yes. Oh God, I remember this moment. So yeah, we're doing a show. I don't know if I don't even think it was near Christmas time. He just looked like Santa.
Yes.
This dude looked full on like Santa Claus. So I saw him, and I remember going, okay, I'm going to do a bit with him where I'm going to introduce that Santa Claus is in the audience, and we're so excited to have him here. And so I start doing it, and I look at him, and I see his face. He turns red. He puts his head down. He is sending every signal without just standing up and going, "Don't talk to me." He is sending every "Don't talk to me" signal. And I'm in it. I'm halfway through my little improvised speech about how he's here, but I haven't revealed his name yet. But I saw that face, and I was like, "Oh shit, okay, I gotta pivot. And thankfully, behind him was a man who looked like Dick Van Dyke. I'm just like, that was so, I'm just, in that moment when he looked like, "Don't ever talk to me, I don't want to be addressed," I out of the corner, I saw the Dick Van Dyke guy, and I went, in my head, and I remember going, "It's okay, parallel, move, gotta move to this guy. All right, same thing, still works, hopefully the audience will get it." And they did.
Oh.
And they got it. And that guy looked like Dick Van Dyke. And I'm pretty sure that guy thought I was going for Santa, too,
yeah.
which I was. But then the pivot happened, and it caught him off guard, and he laughed, and Santa looked very relaxed. He looked like he dodged a bullet.
Yeah, and I think the audience was with you 100%, because I think everyone in the audience knew or assumed that you were talking about the guy that looked like Santa. And I mean,
oh yeah,
I'm assuming that he was a guy who played Santa around Christmas, so he just had the look the entire year.
Oh yeah, I could, yeah, no doubt that guy is a Santa.
Yeah,
but he's also a human being who's like, "I'm just trying to enjoy a show."
Right. And so I think because the way that the house was set up, that little pie, slice of the pie was visible to most of the other audience.
Yeah.
So I think they saw and assumed they knew who you were talking about. They also could read in him, his body language, that this was not going to be a thing that he enjoyed. And so when you pulled out Dick Van Dyke, I remember the audience just erupting in laughter and applause, because it was just masterful.
Thank you. And that was one of those moments. Yeah, that, like you're describing it 100% accurately, in that everyone saw him. Like, he was not hidden. In our audience that time, like, the lighting was always up too. So like,
yeah, when
you were talking to the audience, you could see everybody. But yeah, I think everyone saw what I saw, but a minute before I saw it, because they were like, "Oh, he's not on board." And then I saw it and was like, "Oh shit, he's not on board."
We talked about it afterward, I think, or I asked you about it, because I don't remember being in the show. I remember in my mind, when I'm remembering it, I'm in the house watching all of this happen, but I don't know if that's accurate. So I remember talking to you about it. You didn't skip a beat. It was like you intended to say Dick Van Dyke the entire time, and that was your bit.
Yeah.
And I think that's another reason why the audience loved it so much, because it wasn't ladies and gentlemen, Dick Van Dyke. It was, you committed, and you said it as if that had been your plan the entire time, and it was absolutely delightful.
Oh, thank you. I attribute that to honestly being able to do, like, luckily, like I was saying, like, I got to do short form every week for 4 years, and got stage time and got comfortable talking to an audience. And then also my job at Disney, at the show that I do, it's on our feet and we're reading the audience. So you have to kind of always be in the moment. And a skill set, thank you, that allowed me to do that in the moment. Like internally, I was like, oh shit, I gotta pivot. But I can't let them see me pivot. I have to just do it.
Yeah. There is something to be said for the amount of stage time that you get in terms of training, because there are so many groups that would be so much better. Not that they're bad, but would be so much better if they just had more stage time. And at IO, if you're on a Herald team, you get perform once a month, maybe twice a month.
Yeah.
So finding a space to play is key.
It is, and that's something we struggled with a lot at SAK too. Was a lot of we had the Tuesday and the Wednesday program where people got to play, but even that wasn't perfect, and it wasn't the way it wasn't as smooth as it could have been. And I think you had already been gone at this point, but it was the end of my time at SAC before I left to go to Boston. I was working with John Valinas and a little bit of the other management to try to turn the third floor into like a studio space. Like I wanted to take the third floor of the old SAC building and say, let's build a small stage, 40 seats, and do classes in there, but also then like stagger with our regular shows on Thursday, Friday, Saturday to let some local groups do whatever they want up there.
Yeah.
So that way they can get that experience. It was a build out that we couldn't afford, frankly. Even the cheapest version of it was too much at that time. But yeah, stage time is so valuable, and it's a double-edged sword in improv in a lot of ways, because my team, the DBC, the first Herald team I had, we did 3 shows and then we were cut from the schedule. And when we were asked why, they were like, it just wasn't clicking. We're like, and that was when the Herald Commission was a thing. I don't know if it still is, but
I don't know if it still is. It was when I was up there.
Yeah, and they were like, well, the Herald Commission didn't think it was good. And my coach at the time was like, none of them saw us. Like, they never saw our shows. So they didn't know it was clicking, but also they looked at the schedule. We need to make room. First out, last in, first out was kind of how it was for us. And it's unfortunate. And, looking back, at the time I was all mad, but now I'm like, no, you guys are in a shitty position in an unpaid job to make decisions for a lot of people's hobby. Like, it's not, like, it was tough. Yeah. Like, it's a tough spot. But yeah, that stage time thing, it's such an important piece, and not everybody gets that. And it's hard to find a way to give everybody that opportunity, unfortunately.
Yeah, I imagine there was some expectation that as a team, if you really wanted to play, that you'd be getting the stage time other places, because there was nothing. I mean, IO didn't say you can only perform as your group here.
Yeah, no.
I don't know how many teams actually did that. I don't know as my team ever did, but I imagine that some of that could be an expectation. I only say that because I talked with John Hunter a little while ago, and he was talking about kind of when he was coming up through SAC and the expectations there in terms of getting your acting chops and going and getting training other places to get up to snuff. Anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's definitely something to be said for, because I think we talked about this a lot too, is we both have acting training, so improvising is acting. Like, it's the same thing. So, and that's something I would say to a lot of students too, is they would come through like, how do I get better? I would say take acting classes, because that's going to teach you skills that you can use here.
Yes.
But yeah, it's not a theater's responsibility to give you stage time, I don't think, but I think they should create opportunities for you to get stage time.
Yeah.
It's such a tricky thing, and there's no right answer to it, which is the hardest part, because and anyone who wants stage time is like, well, the answer is to give us stage time. It's like, that is an answer. I agree with you, but there's one stage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it feels completely different as a student going through the programs than it does as someone who has a little bit of responsibility in the theater as well. Because I know, like, as a lab rat or in Gen S, it's like, we need a musician. We need a musician so we can learn how to sing, do improvised music. And the theater's like, well, then, we can't afford to provide you with a musician because we need to pay those people. You got to do that on your own.
Yeah. And on one hand, I get what the theater's saying. On the other hand, I completely get what lab rats and Gen S were saying. Yeah. Like, you're right. You need a musician, and if you guys wanted to, like, it's just the theater couldn't afford it, and that's another reality of all of this that comes into play, and it sucks.
Yeah,
it sucks to have to tell people that you're investing in that you can't invest as much as you want. Yeah. I dealt with that a lot at Improv Boston too. Like, there was, we had our main stage shows, and then we had there were shows that people would apply with, because we would do our seasons. So there was the main stage casts, which were managed and produced by Improv Boston. And there was another series of casts that would be like, I have a show that I'm going to produce, and I'd love a space to do it. I'm like, great, here's the space. We'll sell tickets. Saturdays at 10 in the studio. You got it. Great. And a common thing that came up a lot of times is, well, we're not getting big audiences. Why aren't you advertising us?
Yeah.
And it's a fair question, but we're like, well, because we have to focus on the shows that are produced by us, that are our shows, we're going to advertise you, but we're not going to take out a social media ad for every solo produced show that happens at our theater. We can't afford that. What we can do is direct people to it from the box office or from social media posts, that kind of stuff. But it was the same conversation that was like, you're not doing this. We're like, we know we're not doing that, but here's why. And it was always challenging.
Yeah. Well, and you were just giving them the space, right?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, as far as I remember, we didn't charge them anything. I think we took like a fee from the tickets,
sure,
but like not much. But like it was, yeah, I wasn't one of the producers, so I didn't, and I was running the comedy trainings. I was running the school at that time. And then when I became artistic director, I was artistic director for about 4 months, and then COVID shut us down. But yeah, it was like you apply with the show, and the AD and the producer would look through all the applications and say, okay, this person wants 4 shows. We can give them this time slot for these 4 weeks, or we can give them this. Yeah. So it just kind of became a big old puzzle that we would fill in.
Yeah, that's the same was true in. Well, I mean, I think you probably had it better there. The way I remember it at I.O. and Second City. More Second City, I don't remember the access being quite as free at I.O., but you could pitch a show at Second City and put it up there, but you were renting the space, and they did zero in terms of ticket sales, or maybe they took a portion of ticket sales, but they did zero in terms of advertising or anything. It's like, if you want this to succeed, it's on you. We'll rent you the space, but you're paying for it, and that's the motivation for you to sell your tickets so you get your money back.
Yeah, that's very similar to like the Fringe model.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Fringe did a lot of work, does a lot of work for you, but you pay the upfront money. You got to get butts and seats.
Yeah, and then the theater is kind of off the hook because like, well, we're covered because you're renting the space. So yeah, it's interesting. I wonder how other theaters do it. I might have to try to do a poll for other theaters to see how they do things like that. SAK, does the new space have a separate stage?
No, they don't. They only have the one main stage, and they have 3 dedicated classroom spaces.
Okay.
Yeah, but only the one theater.
Okay. Is there anything else, any other stories or anything else about Improv Boston that you'd like to share?
I'll just say that I learned a lot about myself when I was up there. It was a different kind of company to work for than SAK. Simultaneously more organized and less organized at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I came in, we could talk about this for years because it was a big issue. But like I came in technically in July. I moved up there in September of 2018. By November, mid-November, the entire artistic and management staff was gone. The artistic director, managing director, and the director of the touring company and their outreach program director were all gone. And it happened really quickly and not under the best circumstances for those folks. So we spent a year, 2019 was essentially rebuilding to try to figure out what to do next and just treading water. And then when we finally kind of got some feet under us, COVID happened and the theater was gone. The people there, a lot of great people in that community trying their best to just have a place to be. And I think that space and that theater worked against them sometimes to the detriment of all of them, because now that space no longer exists.
Yeah. I mean, COVID did take out, for one reason or another, COVID was the watermark for a lot of theaters. A lot of theaters suffered from Me Too. Suffering is the wrong word. Were extinguished.
Yeah, but it brought things to light that needed to be brought to light,
yes,
and made things happen.
But for Improv Boston, the catalyst happened before COVID, right? That was the exit or the migration.
Yeah, the exit. There was a lot of issues even before that leadership team came into place. There was a guy whose name I'm not going to say because he's a dirtbag, but he was their managing director, and he did a lot of horrible things, including assaults and such like that he was accused of. I don't know what happened. I wasn't there, but all these accusations were there. He was unceremoniously exited from the theater. And then the new people came in, and a lot of accusations again started flying around about things that were happening or things that weren't being reported, or a lot of things that when I arrived essentially at the point that the fire was about to be set. I got there and there was just a general distrust in the air about it. So yeah, so that happened. And then the next year was spent, I don't want to say twiddling their thumbs, but like it took a really long time to get things going.
Yeah.
And the theater, they brought in Will Luera back from Sarasota to kind of help figure out what the next step should be. And when all was said and done, I ended up getting hired for the artistic director position. I interviewed for it, went through the process, and I got hired. Ironically, the day after everything happened, I talked to the board president, was like, hey, I was an artistic director for 6 years. If you want me to step in, I'm ready to go. And she was like, we'll figure it out. It took them a year. They had to go through the process. I don't blame them. They had to go through a process. But yeah, we were just starting to get our feet under them. I was starting to feel a little more comfortable in my role and like where I fit with the community, because it was a very different energy than Florida, very different people, very different way of life. And we were about to start making some changes, and I was really excited about where we were going. And then COVID happened, and we had to close the space. We tried to go online like so many theaters do, and it just wasn't producing enough income to keep us all getting paid, let alone to keep the theater alive. So in like, I want to say July of 2020, we all took furlough, and the space itself did reopen briefly. Like we got rid of the main theater space and kept our classroom spaces. I was already done at that point. After we took furlough, some other things had happened that just sort of sapped my energy. And I was like, you know what? I don't really want to do this anymore. And Julie and I had decided to move back to Florida because we could afford to buy a house here at the time. But yeah, Improv Boston itself is no longer around, but from it has risen other things. Like,
oh, good.
There's a Union Comedy is out there now, and that's run by 3 or 4 people who I know one of them really well. I was on his team. Oh yeah, our team. I was on an improv team called Stockton. That was another team that I loved, named after John Stockton. Yeah, and this guy Ben Scaria was the coach of that, and he and we played together on the touring company in Improv Boston. He's great. He was one of the founders and one of the guys running Union Comedy, and the other guys, they're all have good heads on their shoulders. So they're opening a new theater, and they're keeping it going. So it's good to see that people have a place to go.
Yeah. And maybe that was the best thing to wipe the slate clean. I mean, Huge closed this last year, which was crazy to me. And it's the nonprofit model has its drawbacks, as does the for-profit model. SAK is a private company, so it can do some things that non-for-profits can't do, and vice versa.
Yeah.
It wasn't that, I mean, I'm assuming the board voted to close, right? Because Improv Boston was nonprofit?
Yep, Improv was a nonprofit, and the board had to make that decision. And they were pretty supportive of us. The guy that they brought in to be the managing director, Josh Garneau, the longtime Improv Boston guy, he worked his ass off to try to save it and really worked hard because that had been his home for years, you know?
Yeah.
But unfortunately, with everything we were up against, it didn't make sense to keep going. Now,
I know you said that you're going to be directing some musical improv at Dr. Phillips Center. Is that right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I got approached to bring an improvised musical. I think the people that run it saw one up in New York, and they were like, hey, we could probably do this. And then someone in the organization said, there's a lot of talent in Orlando. Orlando has an incredible improv talent base, especially in musical improv. So I got contacted, asked if I could put something together. So we did. We call it Forgotten Broadway, the shows you never knew, from the songs that never existed, from the stars that have never been born.
I love it.
So it's, and it's kind of, we do a sort of a cabaret style career retrospective of these fake Broadway stars that we create, and then they improvise music. And then we do a second half of like an improvised musical where during the intermission, the audience writes down different things on sheets of paper. So kind of like lines from a hat, except we draw them throughout the musical that influence the way the musical goes. So
okay.
Yeah, it's pretty fun, and it's we had a show back in the week before Thanksgiving as our first one, and sold out crowd, really good show. So we're booked for the rest of the year coming up. So hopefully we'll keep that momentum going.
That's great. Are you performing as well?
I am. I did for this one. I'm going to maybe step out of the performing role so I can give it more director attention. I think at this point I just needed to. We had a performer unable to perform in the first show, so had to make some shifts. But got an incredible cast, and we're going to try to grow that cast more so that way we can have a good ensemble of performers.
Now, I know you've been doing some playwriting stuff, but is this your first foray back into improv since you moved back to Florida, or have there been others? I
played a couple shows at SAK, not much, but it's my first dive back into doing improv. I did a workshop with the Orlando Improv. I think it was called the O-Town Improv Festival that happened earlier this year.
Yep.
Yeah, I taught a workshop there, and it felt good to kind of work with, like, I'd done a couple of high school workshops, which is fun because it's, people just getting interested in improv, so I kind of get to give them the experience that I had.
Yeah.
But it's nice to work with people, when you go around the circle at the beginning of the class, like, how long have you been doing improv? A few years. I've been doing it for 5 years, 6 years. Like, oh, okay, so they have a common language, so we can get into the nitty-gritty a little bit, which I like.
Yeah. Now, so another question in all of this was, did your experience in Boston poison the well for you a little bit, and it's taken this long to cleanse, or is it just been a natural sort of ebb and flow where you need to take a break every now and again?
Great question. And it's a little bit of both. After everything that happened in Boston, and there was an incident where we were trying to organize a marathon, that we were going to do an online improv marathon, and we were having trouble landing on the date, and it was right around the time where George Floyd was murdered. So we were like, we don't feel comfortable doing, like, let's raise money for our theater when this had just happened. So we delayed it for a couple of weeks, and the date that it landed on was June 19th, which is Juneteenth. And thankfully, one of the performers in the cast was like, hey, that's Juneteenth. We should not do this on Juneteenth. And we're all like, you're right. We should not do that. So we tried to change it, and then someone who was not affiliated with the theater anymore put up a big social media post of how we're trying to take money out of people's pockets and we're trying to take over Juneteenth, and they put our pictures and names on social media, which was not the case. It was a misinformed thing for them to do, but it really hurt, to have someone do that, because they have an axe to grind with the theater, and whether their axe to grind is legitimate or not, that's not the conversation. They took information, misconstrued it, and shared it online, and it really bothered me. And like it kind of put me in this place of like, why am I working hard for this? Like it affected me pretty big. And at that point, that's roughly thereafter we furloughed and we weren't able to keep going. But that's roughly after that point, I was kind of like, I'm not going to go back. I don't want to. After that happened. Yeah. And that's when Julie and I said, come back to Florida. And to be honest, I think I was a little burnt out anyway, but that kind of said to me, you know what, I need to take a step back. And I also, I'm a straight white man in improv. I've been a straight white man in improv for 20 years at this point. And I've definitely not been the best ally at times. I can tell you that right now. I know I've made mistakes. I know I've had blind spots on. So part of me has always thought recently, like, maybe my time's over. Like, I've had that feeling. And when I moved back to Florida, I played SAK a couple times, and I just wasn't feeling it. I wasn't feeling like I fit really in the improv world anymore. And I honestly considered not performing at all anymore for a while. I was like, I think I'm done, and took a breath and took a break, and mainly from improv. I wasn't really improvising. I went back to work at Disney and at Universal and commercials and stuff. But from improv, I was like, I don't know if I belong anymore. I don't know if I fit. And one thing that I've always kind of, spoken about in private and somewhat in public too, like, is I don't want to say old, because old is not the right word, because age doesn't matter. There are people that are 20 years older than me or 10 years older than me that are still right in the thick of it and belong. And there's people that are my age that are just, not evolving and not growing and changing. And I was in this position of, am I not changing enough? Am I trying to hold on to things in the past and I'm not willing to grow? And if I'm not willing to grow, I need to get out of the way. I realized that that's not the case. I think I needed a break and needed to kind of clear my head a little bit.
Yeah.
And look around and go, no, I still have stuff to contribute, but I also now can try to be a better advocate and a better voice in the room and a better version of myself, essentially, is what I want to be. So yeah, it was a little bit of both to answer your question. I needed to step back, and I'm glad I did. And now I'm at a point where I want to step back in. Not to where I was. I don't want to run a theater again. I don't feel like that's what is the right place for me, but I definitely want to produce my own work. I want to produce shows that, not the same old thing that we've done in the past. I want to bring new faces, new voices, and inclusion has become something that I'm trying to learn more about and trying to be better about. So I want improv to be that for everybody, because we always preach about how anybody can do it and anyone can do it, but like a lot of times you look at the stage and you don't see a lot of variety up there. So I know I've been guilty of that. So I want to, as I'm going forward, learn and grow and create opportunity for others to be seen.
That's great. And I think that's perspective is amazing and can be very beneficial. It's not always easy to get there. And I think that, improv as a whole, I think is still way too white in many places.
Yep. And like I want to help change that.
Awesome.
In whatever that means. Like,
yeah.
And for a while I thought it meant I just need to step away and not be a part of it. But I realized that's not the answer, because I have a lot of institutional knowledge that I can share. And in that I can get people more opportunity and give people some guidance and help them. I may not be on stage as much, and that's okay. I'm going to pick my projects that I want to do on stage and be more judicial with that, instead of jumping on every show you can. Like, that's not where I am in my career, in my life. But I'm happy to sort of help shepherd in some new folks.
That's awesome. I would like to talk about one other formative moment in my improv journey that happened with Mike Carr.
I think I know what this is, because I was going to bring it up, but I want to hear you tell it.
Well, no, I was looking for your perspective, because
okay.
And then we can share both sides of what happened. But you, Mike, you happen to be the only person, not only on stage, but in general, that I have ever punched in the face.
Yeah. It was what a moment.
It was not intentional. I should say that right off the bat.
It was. I knew it wasn't intentional before, during, and after.
Okay, so what was your experience of that? And then I will share my experience and some of my shame.
Okay, I remember us on stage. We're doing a scene, and our characters, and I don't remember the details, but I know we were antagonists for each other. And I blame Jose 100%. Jose Rodriguez was in the show and started the chant. I think it was hit him, kick him, punch him in the face.
That
something
was the
like that.
chant. Yes, that was the
Yeah,
chant.
hit him, kick him, punch him in the face. And that happened, and then everyone joined in. And then I remember you went to improvise punch, and by that you swung your hand, which I saw it coming. Like, this is going to happen. The intention was to go in front of my face, and I would have turned my head. I should have turned my head sooner. You came close. You were so close to my face. Your knuckles connected with my nose on the side, and I heard in my head like a pop sound. And I remember going, oh, and looking at you, and your eyes were so wide, and your face was white as a ghost because you did not mean to punch me in the face. And then I immediately went, I think I'm bleeding. I didn't say it. This is all in my brain. I went, I'm bleeding. And I put my hand up to my face, and I took it down, and I remember seeing blood. So I put my hand back up and left stage and went to the bathroom. At which point, I looked in the mirror, and blood was coming out of my nose. It was getting all over the sink. And I remember I remember a couple people coming into the bathroom, but I remember you specifically coming into the bathroom and being like, oh my God, are you okay? I'm so sorry. And I was like, I'm fine. I think I remember like, I'm fine. Go back on stage. It's fine. Don't worry about it. And I was probably hopped up on adrenaline. But I do remember looking at the sink and going, that looks like a murder scene. That's a lot of blood. I did not come back to the show. I do believe you had a funeral for me on stage, which is very nice of you. But I do remember backstage, like sitting there, and like you being so apologetic because it was an accident. I don't remember being angry about it. I think it was like, it happened. I don't know if I was mad. I hope I wasn't.
No, I don't remember you being angry
because I knew it was an accident. But I also remember, again, Jose Rodriguez knows that I'm a little bit of a worrier and says, oh yeah, you can't go to sleep with that. You might die.
Yes.
Just to kind of make me go, oh, I'm going to stay up all night. Great. Thanks, Jose. I slept sitting up that night. I was terrified.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And then I iced it. And then like the next day, when I looked in the mirror, it was 2 black eyes and a puffy nose. It was a broken nose.
I mean, I'm on some level, I'm kind of proud of myself because I didn't.
It was a good punch.
Yeah, I never would. Well, see, I wasn't pulling it at all because I didn't expect to connect. So
no, and
so my memory, you're dead right on the chant. That's exactly what I remember. And I remember we were doing a little run of scenes, and the scene would start innocent, and then the chant would start, and things would go awry.
Oh, yeah.
So my idea was, I tagged you in, and I had you kneel in front of me, and I was a priest giving you communion. And the chant started. So you were kneeling in front of me. This is what I remember anyway. And that's when the chant kind of got to me, and then I swung. In my mind, it was like I was going to be fine, but then you turned your head like the wrong way, and whatever the physics of it were, that sound that you heard in your head echoed through the theater. And the entire audience went at the same time. And for some reason, I could not stop laughing. I was giggling like a schoolgirl, and I don't know, like that. I felt bad that was my reaction. I just punched you accidentally in the face, and I could not stop laughing. And that was how the adrenaline affected me. And yeah, I did come to you in the bathroom, and I remember Jose doing the same thing. I'm like, Jose, stop it! Stop telling him these things. It's gonna be fine.
I did not remember you laughing. I like that my version of it is you were immediately nervous and sad about it.
I was. I mean, I was internally. That was just expressing itself as childish laughter.
Yeah.
That I could not control. And I'm going to have to get some perspective of some of the other people that were in the show, because I don't know if I've ever really gotten their perspective on what happened. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I still feel like the premise there was fine. It fit in with the chanting. Maybe it's just the chanting on stage is always bad. Maybe that's the lesson, the takeaway.
It leads to bad things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
leads to broken noses.
Yeah, few chants are good chants. Maybe is the I don't know I don't know if there's a lesson there or not. It was an accident, and there was an injury.
If anything, it's a reminder that, like, if you're going to do stage combat, go slow. Learn a little bit about stage combat, like everybody involved, because like I have no doubt I probably turned a little bit the wrong way. Like we were young and energetic and just playing. What can I say?
Yeah, and why on earth was I not pulling the punch? I mean, it's a fake punch. It doesn't have to be full speed. It's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, we learn. We learn and we grow.
Yeah, you bore the brunt of it, but I appreciate that. I appreciate you being part of that lesson for me.
Hey, it was a lesson for me too. And I never, you know what I should have done? Like and that story. Anyone who asked me what happened, I just told them the truth. I didn't come up with a better story. I didn't go, oh yeah, it was. I stopped a robbery. Like I came up with nothing. It was just like, no, I got punched on an improv stage. Like I could have created this whole mythology about how I broke my nose, and I didn't. I was honest.
Yeah. So that inspires one of my questions about being injured or seeing an injury on stage.
Oh yeah.
And then there's also the one about any moments where you wondered, like, is this real now? I don't know as the audience would have thought that, because, and there have been moments when you're like, are these two people really angry at each other? I think we saw that even on the SAK stage sometimes between some of the players that would have been there when we were kind of coming up. But I don't think that would have been the case in that one. They would have known that wasn't like some beef that you and I had backstage that we brought on stage with us.
Yeah, no, I don't think I'd ever been in a situation where I felt that. There were some people that were really good at playing like I'm angry. Like I remember Clark was always really good at being like the angry cantankerous guy.
Yeah.
But then backstage he would be cantankerous, but backstage he was usually in a pretty good mood.
Yeah. And I'm hoping at some point to talk to Ian. I don't know if I have his the correct address for Ian, but Ian was another one that was always kind of antagonistic with the audience. The audience loved him, but he was always, antagonistic with the audience, which is something I could never do. Like that's not something I can do as a performer. It wouldn't come across right.
Me either. And when I'm trying to do it, it comes off wrong.
Yeah.
It's just not who I am as a person. I do remember another quick early show story when we had that. It was well, you and Ian specifically. There was that drunken party from a wedding that came into an early show.
Yeah.
And they were off in like the house left over by the entrance. And, we're trying to do the opening and they were just being loud and rude. Like, this isn't funny. And you and Ian both independently of each other, like stepped up and essentially dressed them down and told them, hey, if this isn't for you, I remember Ian going, if this isn't for you, you can leave. The door's right there. Get out. And like you guys just dealt with it. And then I remember it was like, let's restart the show for everybody. And we restarted and the rest of the audience loved it. And those assholes left. And they weren't assholes. That's not fair. They were not in the right place. They were in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah.
Because I don't know that they're bad people, but they behaved badly in that moment. But I remember you guys just in your own ways did the same thing with that audience. Like you were not mean or antagonistic. You were just I remember you being very like straightforward with them, whereas Ian had that edge to him. And it worked. It was like good cop, bad cop. It was fantastic.
Yeah, I do remember being upset in that moment, being like, oh, you guys. And they were probably just not at the right show. They thought they were coming to see something else, and instead they came to early show.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember being like, oh, they have to leave, otherwise this is going to be an uphill battle.
It's going to ruin the night. Yeah, it would have ruined the whole night if they were there. But yeah, the two of you guys just dealt with it. It was fantastic.
The only time I remember actually being angry on stage was a regular show, and I came out with an offer. So I was watching, I won't say the name of anybody, but I was watching from off stage as the scene was going, and it was someone who was apprenticing, and they were like setting out what looked to me like bagels or donuts. I forget which. And then, so I came in, it was still Amelia Street SAK, so I went and I entered through the spandex, and I was like, oh, I brought some bagels for you, but I see you already have some. And they said, those aren't bagels. It's something, and I don't even remember what it was that they said. And I couldn't believe that they were contradicting this thing, that the pretend thing that didn't exist that I had just named. They were saying that I was wrong and that it was something else. And I remember being really, really angry. Benji saved that scene, because he started laughing from his side of the stage. He was on the other team, and he just started laughing so hard. And then the game of the scene became someone would name something, and someone else would say, that's not what that is. That's something else, and fill in the blank with some other sort of thing. So Benji saved that scene and ended up being really, really fun, but it not because of me.
I can relate to that. I've had moments where like I've made an offer and that I thought was really clear, and someone didn't respond to it the way that I thought it should have been responded to. And I remember at that point I've done that a few times, and like I could feel my anger happening on stage, and I could feel like looking over I've definitely had moments where I've looked at the other line side, like, are you fucking kidding me? And sorry, I shouldn't swear. I don't know if we're allowed to do that. Anyway, but like I definitely had those moments, and now I'm like, what's wrong with you, man? You made an offer. Like for me personally, like yours, I get, like you established, you said bagels. It's bagels. Come on. having times where I'm getting angry and I'm like, why am I angry? Because they're not responding the way I want them to respond. That's not my call. Like, I would be like, oh, what's wrong with me? Like, well, now I'm like, no, don't be that guy.
Yeah. Well, and even in retrospect, I feel like I could have, because I felt like at the time I was like, how dare you contradict this thing? And on some level, it's like, yeah, his offer may not have been great, but on the other hand, he was probably very clear in his head what it was that he was doing, and I could have responded differently and said, oh no, I meant what I have in my hand, or oh, not that, this, or, there are a lot of ways I could have navigated out of that without letting it affect me, and that's one of the lessons that I've learned since. I mean, it took me a while to get there. Chicago helped me in that regard too, because there were some moments in Chicago. There's a terrible audition I did another offer that I thought was just terrible that ostensibly was not a great offer, but I could have still dealt with it, and now I could deal with it. But at the time, I froze, and I was just like, "Oh, I can't believe that you put me in this situation." Instead of just rolling with it, and that's part of the inspiration for this was like there have been moments, I'm sure, for all of us where it's been like, "Oh, we felt wronged in a situation, but in retrospect, we could have." The improvisers we are now could have handled them better and could have made gold out of the lead. And
100%.
Yeah, for whatever reason, we didn't at the time. That's it for part 1 of my interview with Mike Carr. In the next episode, we'll talk about how we used to torture Mike in guerrilla theater, some dubious games we used to attempt, including what may be the first mention of feet of hen, which several people have mentioned independently since I spoke with Mike. Mike also answers my Proustian questionnaire. If there's anyone you think I should interview or you want to get in touch for any reason, you can reach me at improvbrain@gmail.com. You can also find me on Patreon. Until next time, thanks for listening to Improv Autopsy.